Mark Rogers TV with you following the national championship win of Clemson over Alabama in dramatic fashion 35-31, the culmination of a journey for the Clemson program under Dabo Swinney for the past 8 years. Since winning its only national championship to date in 1981, Clemson has been a pretty consistent program in its inconsistency and its level or two above mediocrity. This has certainly not been an elite football program, stuck in a lot of 8-4 and 7-5 campaigns with a number of talent around it in the recruiting base in the Carolinas and down south, going elsewhere. Clemson plucking a number of future NFL stars, but mired in that rut of 7 and 8 wins and mid-tier bowl games. Then Dabo Swinney arrives. Not much heralded, certainly onto the scene, but we quickly found out that this guy was full of energy, spark, and something deeper than that. A genuine love for his players, as he described tonight after the game, and it's a different approach to coaching than we've seen in quite some time and maybe ever. It's a different spin. It's a little Pete Carroll. There are some elements of some other great coaches across America that we've seen presently and in the past, but it is certainly genuine, and it is certainly unto itself Dabo Swinney through and through, and it worked for the past several years, and it certainly worked tonight in defeating the giant Alabama Crimson Tide at 35-31. This team has won a number of football games, a lot of big games against the likes of Ohio State and LSU and Notre Dame and a number of other teams. Florida State, of course, in the mix over the past few years. But Clemson reaches the top of the mountain tonight and can truly be labeled in that elite class with a number of others, that select group in college football. All right, let's talk about Deshaun Watson. He is the best player in college football. He's the best quarterback. We talked about it right here after the Heisman Trophy was given to one Lamar Jackson, who compiled statistics against mediocre competition. But in the crunch, in the clutch situations, Deshaun Watson, the best in college football, and he proved it against what we consider the best defense, and certainly still the best defense despite over 500 yards of total offense for a second consecutive year. Clemson against Alabama. Deshaun Watson beaten up early, little time to pass, nowhere to run, and down 14-0, he persevered, and he battled back with his arm and with his legs. All right, let's take you to the last couple drives of the game because, of course, Deshaun Watson found his team down 24-21, and he led 2 long touchdown drives in the final 6 minutes of the game to take the lead and then to retake it and to claim the victory with 1 second left to play. What was interesting on the final drive was that it appeared as though Clemson and Dabo Swinney were playing for a field goal, which would have been catastrophic, most likely. They got a couple big pass plays in the final 2 minutes as Jalen Hurts scampered for the touchdown and left Deshaun Watson with 2:07 on the clock. So Clemson moves it very quickly to roughly the 30-yard line, and then it took them 33 seconds, if you look at the play-by-play in the box score, 33 seconds to run one play. You see this from a number of teams. They get comfortable, they move it quickly, and they think they have plenty of time, or the coach is getting conservative and playing for the field goal, which, again, would have not been the right move, and as it turned out, Dabo Swinney knew what he was doing. But they did find themselves in a crunch when they shouldn't have, because they ran a play with 1:01 left on the clock inside the Alabama 30, got the one completion, and then suddenly wasted 33 seconds and only had 28 seconds to work with. They called the timeout with 19 seconds left to play, and then they were staring at a first down, but with a limited period of time. They, of course, maneuvered the clock and ran one of the most basic plays along the goal line that you see in flag football that's run, the rub play. And Alabama may have seen it coming. They certainly know more football than you and I, but it's almost impossible to stop when played correctly. And if we remember the Florida State Notre Dame from a game from a couple years ago on the final play of the game when Florida State won and with Jameis Winston at quarterback, You can run it just right, and if your wide receivers know what they're doing and either cross or run into the receivers, then cross, then you perform the rub or the pick, and the referees will not call it. And Hunter Renfrow hauls in another touchdown, and for a second consecutive national championship game, Hunter Renfrow out of the slot, 2 touchdowns against Alabama, and this one, the game winner. Deshaun Watson, in a team sport in which you need to have all 11 players and certainly need to have an offensive line, the most important unit on the field, the offensive line, Deshaun Watson shoulders more of an offense than any player in college football, with the arm, with the legs. Lamar Jackson, the Heisman Trophy winner. Deshaun Jackson, the best player in the country and certainly the best quarterback. What are his NFL prospects? Well, we've certainly heard in recent days that he would not even be selected in the first round, that North Carolina's Mitch Trubisky would be the only quarterback selected in the first round. I would love for the scouts to give it another look in regards to the game tape, because he's got the size, he's got the mobility, and of course he's a poised and polished passer with more to learn at the next level. Certainly, I'm not an NFL scout, but he looks the part. The difference between this year and last year, as we talked in our preview, might just be Mike Jackson. Clemson with a top level wide receiver core last year, but without Mike Jackson to blow the top off the defense, and we saw the special type plays that Mike Williams could make in this game. 8 catches for 94 yards and 1 touchdown. The Clemson wide receiver core is so deep. 4 receivers, 4 different players catching balls for more than 90 yards on an Alabama defense that finally wore out. It is still the best defense in college football, but having to be on the field for 99 plays to just 67 run for Alabama was a huge difference in this game and ultimately Alabama's demise. No special team gaffes for the Clemson Tigers this year as opposed to last year, because that was the difference. Kenyon Drake and the perfectly executed onside kick. This year, Alabama and Nick Saban, no rabbits under their sleeves, and most likely knew that Dabo Swinney had prepared his team for any tricks along the onside kick route, and it was, of course, Clemson that executed the perfect onside kick when it was probably not necessarily needed, but to avert a possible return, that was a brilliantly executed play and called play by Dabo Swinney with 1 second left on the clock. Another huge difference between 2015 and 2016, or 16 and 17 if you're looking at the calendar. Jalen Hurts made some great plays, and credit the true freshman for making the last-minute drive. So he had the ball out of his hands, and Clemson won it. And despite not being the most gifted passer or developed passer at this point in his career, he took the ball with 4.5 minutes left on the clock and quickly turned it into a game-leading touchdown as he scampered for the end zone. But Jalen Hurts, 13 for 31 on this day for just 131 yards. Little support for the run game for Alabama. If you go back 1 year, Jay Coker was considered to be a marginal passer by some, and he ripped up the Clemson defense, not for a ton of completions, but for big gainers, for downfield stretch throws, 335 yards in the passing game for Alabama last season. Bo Scarborough, much like Derrick Henry early in the championship game, ripped up the Clemson defense. Of course, he scored the first touchdown of the night. He ran 16 times for 93 yards. But after tearing up the Clemson defense early, he was bottled up and contained, unlike Derrick Henry last year. That's another huge difference in this one. Ben Boulware, of note in diagnosing plays and rushing to the play very quickly and blowing up some plays, in particular 2 tackles for loss and 6 total tackles. It's a classic, of course. How does it rank? Well, maybe we'll get to that in the next few days in regards to ranking some of the great national championship games during the playoff era and the BCS era. Need to hear from you. Clemson defeats Alabama, and the Tigers have a national championship. It's first in 34 years. Let's talk it up right here on Mark Rogers TV.